Hello folks, let's talk about wood screws for a minute. I'm a machinist and I make things out of metal, do all sorts of products and tooling and repair jobs out of metal, aluminum, steel, exotics, you name it. But on the at home, I'm not able to engage in those activities because I don't quite have enough money to set up a shop at home and do this kind of work, so I do mostly woodworking at home. And with that in mind, I use screws quite a bit, a different type of screw than generally than what we use in the metal shop. These are wood screws, and there's different kinds of wood screws. And when I go to the hardware store, I'm usually quite frustrated by the screws that I see because the quality is so bad. A lot of the stuff coming from overseas are really doing us a huge disfavor because the stuff that they produce is, in a lot of ways, just simply garbage. And one of my favorite examples is a screw that looks like this one right here. This is just an ordinary little flathead screw because the back of the head is flat, so they call it a flathead screw. Typically got a slot through the head there for a standard screwdriver. Okay, but it's a thread form that really bothers me, and I don't know if you can pick this up too well on the camera here, but it looks like what I've got up there on the whiteboard. The threads are there, but they've got this huge radius in between, and the difference between the tops of those threads and the neck underneath there, you know, it's not as much as what I'd like to get a good grip on the wood, you know, for my purposes. Here's a screw that's just a little bit better. I like using these. Again, it's a similar screw, but it's got a Phillips. Takes a Phillips screwdriver. It's a flathead. It's kind of got a washer molded right into the head of the screw itself, which is kind of nice. But again, the thread form is shallow. The screws that I prefer almost for anything are what they call drywall screws, and that looks like this little animal here. This one here happens to be cadmium plated. It helps with corrosion resistance. It gives it a kind of a yellow iridescent kind of look. But they come several different varieties, but this one here is a 2-inch screw, and I like these because it looks more like my drawing up there on the board. The threads have a more definite form, and the screw threads themselves are a bit sharper, and I like that because I think that's going to cut into the wood and hold that screw in place a bit better. Now what I do when I get a screw is I take out my calipers. I haven't talked to these about these up to this point yet, but I will in the future. These are what we call dial calipers. They also have the older ones that are called vernier calipers, and I'll discuss them someday. These are dial. These are were invented after that. And then more recently, and like maybe 30 years or 40 years ago, they came up with digital calipers. I prefer the dial calipers, and like I said, I'll talk about these in the future. But these are a measuring device that machinists use. I'm going to see if I can hold this up here so you can see it. You slide it back like that. Actually, you use a little thumb grip right here, and you pull the jaws open, the calipers open, and it measures things in thousandths of an inch. Now as machinists, we work in thousandths of an inch, so this is like a fish swimming in water to me. I'm very comfortable with this. If you're not comfortable with it, then you're gonna have to pick that up somewhere along the way, and I'll talk about it in a future episode. But what I typically do is I'll take my screw, whatever size I'm using, and I'll actually measure it like this right here. Now, earlier when I measured this, I don't know if I'll quite get the same reading here, but I got a measurement. This is what you call the major diameter. That's the major because it's going right across the tops of the threads there. So on my little drawing there, it's the dimension that's illustrated in blue. That is the major diameter. That's the maximum diameter of your threads. On this particular screw, that's about 152 thousandths of an inch in diameter. Okay, and I jot that down on a piece of paper. And then what I do is I take my calipers again, and I'm gonna, this won't show up as well, but I'm gonna try. I measure what we call the minor diameter, which is between the threads going down inside there. So I don't know if you can see that quite, but I'm trying to show you what it looks like. I don't think I'm doing very good, but I'm measuring. If you look at the drawing there, it's going to be the green dimension. That's your minor diameter. That's the smallest diameter on your screw. Okay, the bottom of the threads, if you will. Okay, now ordinarily, under most circumstances, I'll take that diameter. In this case here, I believe I say it's 90 thousandths, 0.090. And so I'll look for a drill that's close to 90 thousandths, a drill bit that's close to 90 thousandths, and I'll use that to drill my hole into my wood, because that's going to give me good contact with a screw. I let the threads actually cut into the wood itself, and the minor diameter just kind of rides through the hole that I cut at 90 thousandths. Now in red there, I wrote something that's called the interference fit. This is where the screw is, the hole that I drilled is actually smaller than the minor diameter on the thread, and I'll do that for certain applications where I really want it to anchor in there and to go in there tight. And for different kinds of woods, you have to allow different amounts of interference, because if you use a diameter that's too small and you're trying to drive in a screw that's 2 inches long, good luck with that, because there's a good chance that the head will actually twist off, or you'll strip out the the Phillips cross in the head of your screw, and you won't get very far. So I wrote kind of a general rule up there that for a good compression fit, if you want things to really get into the wood and hold it tight, then you'll drill a hole that's somewhere right at that minor diameter or a little bit smaller. If it's a hardwood, or if it's a short, or if it's a long screw. If you're drilling into or putting a screw into softwood, like most of your pines, those woods are very soft, and for that I actually go a bit smaller so that there's more interference, because that wood is, especially out of managed forests, that wood is very soft. And if you don't drill that hole small enough, that screw will pull out fairly easily. So I will use an even smaller drill. I think I've got it up on the board, some 80 thousandths, 0.080 in diameter, maybe even smaller than that. But if you're drilling into like oak is a hardwood, and if you drill a hole that small and you try to put this screw into it, it's going to be really tight, and it may break off before it gets all the way down to the bottom. So you use a little bit of judgment on what you're trying to accomplish. The other thing I do is, if I've got two pieces of wood that I'm joining together, I've got one piece of wood here that the screw is going to anchor into, and I've got another piece of wood that the head is going to go through or into, and the screw is going to be on top here. This piece of wood here, I'll actually drill the hole so that it's right at the major diameter here, right at 152, or maybe even just a little bit smaller than that, because I don't want it to the screw to really thread into that. I want it to pull those two pieces of wood together. So what I'll do is I'll put a clearance hole in this at 152, and I'll drill a smaller hole into this wood here where it's actually going to anchor it. And that way these two woods are pulled together by the strength of the screw down here and the head up here, and it pulls those two pieces of wood together. If they're both drilled at the same diameter, you're not going to get the same squeeze that you would otherwise. Clearance hole for the top piece and interference hole for the bottom piece. General rule of thumb. Thank you very much for listening. We'll talk more about this sort of thing in the future. Thank you. God bless.